The first time she called me just the assistant, I was pouring her champagne. It was at the Hawthorne Foundation Gala, a glittering ballroom where power was currency and smiles were weapons. Mrs. Lydia Hawthorne stood in a gown worth a year of my salary, diamonds dripping from her neck. She was the CEO's wife, poised, polished, practiced. My husband's assistant, she said to a cluster of board members' spouses, gesturing at me like I was a decorative vase. She keeps him organized. They laughed lightly. I smiled politely. In truth, I wasn't just an assistant. I managed compliance, oversaw contracts, and quietly corrected the CEO's errors before they reached investors. But none of that mattered to Lydia. In her eyes, I was invisible, a background note in her symphony of luxury. I placed her glass down and stepped back, my face calm but my mind sharp. People like her never saw the quiet ones coming. And in this world, underestimation wasn't an insult, it was an opportunity waiting to unfold. The morning after the gala, the office gleamed like always, marble floors, glass walls, and the faint scent of espresso and power. I arrived before anyone else, unlocking my desk and opening the day's schedule. I liked the silence before chaos. When Mr. Hawthorne arrived, he smiled. "Morning, Arya. Zurich call at 9? "Yes, sir. I've prepped your notes." He nodded. "You're a lifesaver." That was the truth, though no one would ever say it publicly. At 9, the Zurich call began. At 10, Lydia swept in like perfume and diamonds. "Arya," she said smoothly, placing a leather purse on my desk. My husband forgot his tablet. "He's in a call, Mrs. Hawthorne," I said. She smiled faintly. "So you're the one who runs this place." "I just keep it moving." Her lips curved. "Of course you do. Just the assistant." Then she opened his office door without knocking. I watched her vanish inside and thought, some people mistake access for authority. By the end of the week, the whispers started. The Aurora merger, our biggest deal in years, was being simplified. That word never meant anything good. When the revised draft hit my inbox, I noticed changes. Small, elegant, and dangerous. Clauses about profit share and ownership had been adjusted. I scrolled down. The prepared by line made my stomach tighten. Prepared by Lydia Hawthorne. I blinked. The CEO's wife had edited the legal contract. That wasn't just irregular. It was reckless. I printed both versions and laid them side by side. The new one heavily favored Aurora, Lydia's cousin was on their board. The math was subtle but clear, one misplaced signature, and the company could lose millions. I didn't need to guess her motive. In her world, power wasn't earned, it was borrowed from those too polite to question it. But I wasn't polite. I was observant. And I'd just found the thread that could unravel her perfect facade. The next morning, she was sitting at my desk when I arrived, scrolling through her phone like she owned the building. "I'm just helping speed things up," she said without looking up. "You assistants can be so slow." I smiled thinly. "Caution isn't slowness, Mrs. Hawthorne. It's insurance." She chuckled. "Oh, you sound like my husband's lawyers." Before I could reply, the CEO stepped out of his office. "Lydia? I didn't expect you here." She stood gracefully. "You said you wanted this deal moving." "I'm just helping." He hesitated, the kind of hesitation that says, "I'll allow this for peace." My stomach sank. She turned to me. "Send the final draft to Aurora by morning. I'll sign the preliminary letter today." I blinked. "You'll sign it?" She smiled with that condescending softness only the privileged can master. "It's just paperwork, Arya. Surely you can manage that." I nodded. "Of course." But as I watched her walk into his office, I thought, if she wants to play executive, she should learn what signatures mean. That night, I stayed late. The office lights dimmed, and the city glowed through the glass, a river of gold below steel towers. I opened both versions of the Aurora contract and studied every detail. Every comma mattered. Every clause was a potential weapon. Then, quietly, I built my trap. I created 2 versions of the final sign-off letter. One real, one slightly altered, a harmless-looking redirect clause buried deep in the text. If she read it, nothing would happen. If she didn't, the system would flag her signature as the origin of an unauthorized amendment, an automatic audit trigger. I printed both, labeled them clearly, and locked them in my drawer. The next morning, Lydia glided in, perfume first. "Are my papers ready?" she asked. "Yes," I said smoothly. 2 drafts. Choose whichever you prefer." She smiled, not even glancing down, and signed the second one. Her pen left a perfect flourish. I smiled faintly. Because in this company, signatures were power. And she'd just signed her own undoing. 2 days later, the Aurora team confirmed receipt of the signed contract. I watched the confirmation email appear in my inbox and felt a small flicker of satisfaction. By afternoon, the boardroom buzzed with excitement. Lydia had apparently boasted about streamlining the deal, and the directors were congratulating the CEO. She floated through the office like royalty, her perfume trailing confidence. "See, Arya," she said, pausing by my desk. "Everything works faster when I'm involved." I smiled politely. "We'll see once legal finishes review." She tilted her head. Always so cautious. "It must be exhausting, worrying so much." "It's part of the job," I replied evenly. When she left, I checked the audit dashboard. The system had already flagged an anomaly in the signature verification log. The redirect clause was active. If she'd read the document, she'd have seen it. But she hadn't. By the next morning, the first internal alert would reach compliance. And Lydia Hawthorne's perfect deal would start to crumble, not because I sabotaged it, but because she had ignored every safeguard built to protect her. The following morning, I found the CEO in a meeting with the legal department. He looked stressed, sleeves rolled up, coffee untouched. When I entered, he turned sharply. "Arya, did you send the Aurora draft?" "Yes, sir." It was signed and delivered by Mrs. Hawthorne herself, as per her instruction. The legal director sighed. "There's an issue. A clause in the file redirects exclusivity rights to Aurora's offshore partner. It's technically non-binding, but it triggered an automatic audit." The CEO rubbed his forehead. "You're telling me we look incompetent in front of investors?" I stayed calm. "Would you like me to retrieve the original unaltered draft?" His head snapped up. "You have that?" "Yes. I maintain all version histories." He exhaled in relief. "Send it immediately." "And Arya, thank you." Lydia appeared moments later, feigning confusion. "What's going on?" Her husband shot her a look that made her falter. I handed her the printed audit report. "It seems there was a discrepancy in the contract you signed, Mrs. Hawthorne." Her smile faded. "What kind of discrepancy?" "The kind that shows up when you don't read what you're signing." By noon, the internal buzz had turned into a quiet storm. Lydia retreated to her husband's office, doors closed, voices muffled but heated. I stayed at my desk, methodically processing files. Calm was my weapon. Through the glass, I could see her gesturing wildly, pointing, insisting, denying. Her husband just sat still, his expression unreadable. When she finally stormed out, she paused by my desk. "You set me up." I looked up slowly. "You signed your own document, Mrs. Hawthorne." Her voice trembled, low and furious. You think you're clever, don't you? No, I said. Just careful. Her eyes burned, but she said nothing more. That afternoon, the CEO called me in. Arya, I want a full trace of every document Mrs. Hawthorne accessed in the last month. Yes, sir. He hesitated, voice softer. You've always been thorough. Don't let this mess rattle you. I won't, I said. But inside, I could feel the shift. Lydia's confidence had cracked. And once cracks appear in power, they spread faster than anyone expects. The audit took 2 days. Every system record, every file version, every edit Lydia made was catalogued. I didn't exaggerate or omit, I simply presented the truth. By Friday morning, the findings were ready. I placed the sealed report on the CEO's desk before the board meeting began. When Lydia arrived, she was radiant as ever, designer dress, perfect hair. You'd never know she was under scrutiny. The boardroom filled with quiet tension. The CEO opened the report. It appears there were unauthorized edits to the Aurora contract, he said evenly. Our compliance officer traced the source. He turned the page and read aloud, user ID, L. Hawthorne. Lydia's fingers tightened around her clutch. That's absurd, she said quickly. Arya must have framed. I cut in gently. All edits are timestamped and IP logged, Mrs. Hawthorne. I couldn't alter them even if I wanted to. The CFO leaned forward. You mean this was done from your account, Lydia? Her voice broke. I was only trying to help. The CEO closed the file quietly. You've done enough. The fallout was swift. By the next day, Lydia stopped showing up at the office. Rumors spread, health leave, family matters, personal adjustment. But everyone knew. The Aurora deal was salvaged, but her credibility wasn't. Mr. Hawthorne called me into his office Monday morning. Arya, he said, his tone softer than I'd ever heard, you saved us from a public disaster. I nodded. Just doing my job. He smiled faintly. That's what makes you exceptional. As I turned to leave, he added, I'd like you to attend the executive board meeting next week, in Lydia's seat. You've earned it. For a moment, I couldn't speak. When I finally did, my voice was calm. Thank you, sir. That evening, I walked past Lydia's empty desk, the same spot where she'd once mocked me. The same air still smelled faintly of her perfume, but it didn't sting anymore. It just reminded me of what arrogance always forgets. That quiet doesn't mean powerless. It means patient. And patience always finds its moment. The board meeting that week felt different. I sat at the long table for the first time, not behind it with my notepad. The city skyline stretched behind the glass walls, sunlight cutting sharp lines across polished wood. Mr. Hawthorne introduced me briefly. This is Arya. She's been instrumental in stabilizing the Aurora deal. There were nods, murmurs of approval, even a few smiles. It felt strange, being seen after years of invisibility. As the meeting continued, Lydia's name came up only once, quietly, by a board member who said, perhaps we should consider limiting family access to internal systems. Everyone agreed. After the meeting, I lingered by the window. For a moment, I thought about all the times I'd been dismissed, reduced to an invisible worker who kept things moving. Now, the same people who once overlooked me were asking for my opinion. When I got home that night, I poured a glass of wine and finally let myself smile. For the first time in years, silence had been my greatest strength, and it had spoken louder than anyone expected. The calm didn't last. By the next morning, a rumor was circulating. Someone had told the press about the Aurora contract mishap. The article didn't name names, but the hints were enough. It painted the company as careless, a luxury empire built on image, not integrity. I knew exactly who leaked it. Lydia was still trying to claw back control. At lunch, Mr. Hawthorne called me in. "We'll manage the narrative," he said tightly. "I've contacted PR. But we need documentation, proof the issue was caught internally before damage occurred." I already had it. Every timestamp, every audit log. I handed him a folder. "This will show we acted before any external party could exploit it." He flipped through the pages, his expression softening. "You always think ahead." "I try to," I said. He exhaled. "Lydia won't stop here. Be careful." I nodded, though my pulse quickened. He was right. People like Lydia didn't stop when they lost power. They broke things trying to get it back. That evening, my access credentials were revoked. I discovered it at 7:42 p.m. when I tried to log into the compliance system. Access denied. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. Then I checked the admin logs. Someone had manually deactivated my account. Only 2 people had that authority, the CEO and the internal administrator. Or someone using their credentials. I called IT security. "This is Arya. My account's been disabled." The lead tech hesitated. "We got a request from the CEO's account 20 minutes ago." I frowned. "He's at the investor dinner." Silence. Then, quietly, "We'll restore it. Keep this between us." By the time my access returned, the digital trail was clear. The request originated from Lydia's old login, a backdoor she must have created during her helpful phase. I printed the evidence, sealed it in an envelope, and locked it in my drawer. By morning, I knew she'd try something bolder. And I'd be ready. Friday arrived with tension thick enough to taste. An emergency meeting was called. The CEO looked tired, jaw set, eyes red. "Someone breached our internal access systems last night," he said. "Compliance detected unauthorized attempts to alter the audit records." Lydia's name wasn't spoken, but every glance in the room carried it. He looked at me. "Arya, could you walk us through the logs?" I projected the data onto the screen. Each attempt traced back to the same inactive user ID, L. Hawthorne. I said calmly, "These were backdoor credentials created 3 months ago during the Aurora prep period." The CFO leaned forward. "Who authorized those?" The CEO's silence said enough. After the meeting, he called me into his office privately. "I can't believe she'd stoop this low," he said quietly. "You've handled this with more grace than I deserve." "It's not about grace," I said softly. "It's about boundaries." He nodded slowly. "From today, you report directly to me." Outside, the air felt lighter, like the storm had finally started to break. The following week, the news broke publicly. A leaked statement confirmed that Lydia Hawthorne had been removed from all company access following a breach of internal compliance. No names beyond that. No drama. Just quiet, factual, final. The markets barely flinched. Investors, in fact, applauded the company's swift containment. Inside the office, people walked differently, less anxious, more focused. I was officially promoted to Senior Operations Advisor. My new office had a window that looked out over the city. Sam, one of the analysts I'd mentored, dropped by that afternoon. "So," he said with a grin, "what's it feel like to be the woman who outsmarted the CEO's wife?" I laughed softly. It wasn't about outsmarting her. He raised an eyebrow. Then what was it about? Letting truth do what arrogance never can, correct itself. That evening, I watched the sunset stain the skyline gold. I thought of Lydia, her diamonds, her confidence, her carelessness. And I whispered to myself, you should have read the fine print. Peace in a company like ours was always temporary. The Monday after my promotion, I received an anonymous email. Subject: you should have stayed quiet. Attached was a blurry photo, me leaving the CEO's office late at night. The kind of image that could twist into rumor. For a moment, my stomach dropped. Then I saw the file data. The image had been captured weeks ago, from internal security footage. Lydia still had contacts somewhere inside. By noon, whispers had already begun. "She's too close to the boss," someone murmured near the break room. I didn't defend myself. I documented everything. At 4 p.m., I walked into IT security. "Pull every camera log from the last 30 days, I said quietly. "And I want timestamps cross-checked with former user credentials." The manager hesitated. "This about the leak?" I nodded. 3 hours later, he returned with a folder. "You were right. The access came from an external VPN. It matches a device previously registered to Mrs. Hawthorne." I thanked him and smiled faintly. It wasn't rage I felt anymore. It was confirmation she was unraveling herself without my help. By Wednesday, the photo had reached the gossip blogs. CEO's assistant linked to internal power struggles? The headline was poison. The comments worse. I sat in my office, reading the article once, then closing the tab. Mr. Hawthorne called within minutes. "Ignore it," he said. "Legal's already tracing the leak. I know you had nothing to do with this." "I'm fine," I said softly. "Just disappointed." He sighed. "She's hurting, Arya. And people who hurt that way burn everything." That evening, the board convened an emergency meeting. I was invited. The legal director opened with the report. The external leaks came from a private account linked to Mrs. Lydia Hawthorne. "We've issued a cease and desist." The CEO looked weary. "She's not the woman I married." For a moment, the room was silent. Then one of the board members turned to me. "Ms. Arya, your professionalism through this has been exemplary." I nodded. "Thank you." When the meeting ended, I lingered behind, not to gloat, but to breathe. The storm was finally shifting direction. That Friday morning, I arrived early. The air felt clearer somehow, lighter, as if the building itself had exhaled. When I logged in, a new memo awaited me, company statement for press release. I read it carefully. It credited internal compliance oversight led by Senior Advisor Arya Lane for preventing a major corporate breach. My name, printed in black ink beneath the company seal. I stared at it for a long moment, letting it sink in. The same people who once called me just the assistant were now publicly acknowledging my role. By noon, the press release hit every major business outlet. OmniView Systems' integrity praised amid scandal recovery. Messages flooded my inbox: congratulations, gratitude, curiosity. Even the CFO stopped by my office. "That was masterful," he said, leaning on the doorframe. "You turned silence into strategy." I smiled faintly. It wasn't strategy. It was necessity. Still, when I looked at my reflection in the window that night, I didn't see an assistant anymore. I saw the architect of calm in chaos. The following week, Lydia resurfaced. She appeared at the shareholders' dinner, uninvited, dazzling in gold, her smile as sharp as ever. I was there, seated beside the CEO, taking notes discreetly. When she approached the table, conversation stalled. "Darling," she said smoothly, placing a hand on her husband's shoulder, "I just wanted to congratulate you both. The company's doing so well." Her tone was sweet enough to poison a room. Mr. Hawthorne didn't rise. "Lydia, this isn't appropriate." She laughed softly. "Oh, come now. I hear your assistant's running everything now." I met her gaze calmly. "Not everything. Just the parts that matter." A few nearby investors chuckled quietly. Her smile faltered. "Careful, Arya. Power shifts fast in this world. I held her stare. So does reputation. For a moment, the air between us felt electric, quiet war dressed in silk and diamonds. Then she turned sharply, her heels clicking across marble, leaving a faint echo behind. It was the last time she ever walked into one of our events. A week later, Lydia officially resigned from all company-affiliated boards. The announcement was short, clean, and surgical. Mr. Hawthorne called me into his office. "It's over," he said simply. I nodded. For her, maybe. For us, it's just the next version. He smiled faintly. You think in code even when you're talking about people. Code doesn't lie, I said. He laughed quietly, then slid a folder toward me. Inside was a letter of promotion, Director of Corporate Integrity and Compliance. For a moment, I couldn't speak. You earned it, he said. You built a system that caught what others ignored. You saved this company. I met his eyes. All I did was read what others refused to. That night, I stayed late in my new office, overlooking the skyline. The city glowed like circuitry, bright, connected, alive. I opened a blank document and typed my first log as director. Integrity restored. System stable. No further issues. Then I leaned back, smiling softly. Silence, once again, had spoken loudest of all. The weeks that followed were peaceful, almost eerily so. The air in the office was lighter. People no longer whispered when I entered a room. They spoke to me directly, respectfully. Every major publication had run the story, OmniView System survives corporate scandal, thanks to internal oversight. I stopped reading after the third headline. Recognition was nice, but it wasn't why I'd stayed late all those nights. It was about balance, about restoring the invisible order that arrogance had broken. One evening, as I was packing up, Mr. Hawthorne stopped by my door. You could leave now, you know, he said gently. You've proven everything. I smiled faintly. It's not about proving anything. It's about leaving it better than I found it. He nodded slowly. That's why you'll run this place someday. When he left, I stared at the city lights glowing below the window. Power wasn't about titles or noise. It was about steadiness. And I'd finally learned how to hold it without breaking. A month later, Lydia requested a meeting. Her assistant reached out, polite but hesitant. Mrs. Hawthorne would like to speak privately, if possible. I thought about declining. But then I realized, closure is its own kind of professionalism. We met in a quiet cafe downtown. She arrived wearing muted colors this time, no diamonds, no sharp perfume. Just a scarf and tired eyes. I didn't ask you here to apologize, she said immediately. I didn't expect you to, I replied. She stirred her tea, gaze fixed on the cup. You embarrassed me, Arya. You embarrassed yourself, I said softly. I just didn't cover it up. Her hand trembled slightly, but she didn't argue. You know, I used to envy you. The way people trusted you. The way you stayed calm. I smiled faintly. Calm isn't natural. It's practice. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, I hope you use that power kindly. I intend to. When she left, I didn't feel triumph, just peace. Some storms don't end with thunder. They fade into clarity. The company thrived in the months after Lydia's exit. Aurora renewed their contract under better terms, and a new deal with an international logistics firm doubled our quarterly revenue. Mr. Hawthorne stepped back from day-to-day operations, appointing me to oversee compliance, strategy, and interdepartmental leadership. It was strange, sitting in meetings with people who once brushed past me without notice. Now they waited for my word. At first, I struggled with it, the weight of being seen. But Sam, my old colleague from analytics, said something that stuck. You don't owe anyone loudness, he told me. You just owe them results. So that's what I gave them. We rebuilt policies, trained managers, and implemented new transparency systems. Every document was tracked, verified, and accessible. The culture shifted slowly, then all at once. When new hires asked how it happened, the veterans always said, it started with an assistant who read everything. And that, somehow, was enough. The following spring, I was invited to speak at the Global Women in Leadership Summit. When I walked onto that stage, the lights felt impossibly bright. Hundreds of faces looked up at me, executives, founders, assistants, interns. My name is Aria Lane, I began, my voice steady. And for years, I was the quiet one in the room. A few people smiled knowingly. I used to think silence was a weakness. Then I realized silence isn't absence. It's observation. It's the pause before precision. The room went completely still. I didn't fight with noise, I continued. I learned to fight with truth and paperwork. Laughter rippled softly through the crowd. Every system, every empire, depends on the ones who read the fine print. So read it. Know it. Guard it. Because when power forgets the rules, someone has to remind it. When I finished, the applause wasn't wild, it was warm, real, lasting. And in that moment, I realized the truth. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's evolution. 1 year later, I sat in my corner office as the sun bled gold across the skyline. The world outside glimmered like 1,000 open windows, each one reflecting a story, a choice, a consequence. My desk was clean except for a framed photo of the old team, before the chaos, before Lydia. Sam had taken it during one of those quiet nights when no one thought history was being made. On my screen, the internal dashboard pulsed steady green, integrity level, 100%. System stable. I opened a blank document and typed a note for the next person who'd sit here after me. Never mistake silence for weakness. The loudest truths are written, not shouted. I saved the file under legacy.txt and leaned back, smiling faintly. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was surviving the system. I had become part of the framework, the code that kept it honest. Outside, the city lights flickered like quiet applause. And as I turned off my monitor, I whispered, just for myself. System stable. No further issues. And for once, it really was.